So this week's trio is a spice I can't believe I've not spoken about yet, is cardamom, and that's in a lot of fragrances, and I think it's kind of a universally loved note, isn't it? It can smell a bit green, it can smell a bit sharp, it can smell to me adds a bit of a thick wateriness in there. It's not like juniper, but it gives things a bit of a texture. It can be a bit sweet. It depends which sort of cardamom it is. It can add a bit of a fizz and a bit of life mixed with other things. It can create, to me anyway, that kind of cola feel. It's a magnificent spice. I do bloody love cooking with it, carefully, very carefully, because it could completely overwhelm something, can't it? But generally I can see why people love the note, myself included. I don't need to go too much into it because I think it's a note we're all kind of very aware of. Cardamom. So for my indie is a gifted bottle. Not always the best at, with these trios mentioned that, but Sweden from Scentedsnowdrops. Now this is predominantly woods, vetiver, lots of kind of Swedish smelling woods. There might be a little kiss of oud in there, or an algarwood kind of thing. There's also raspberry, and it just is, it's like walking through a kind of green alpine forest with the raspberries growing. It's a bit of a warm day, but it's still got that breezy chill, and that's where the cardamom comes in. It just adds this life to it, this vitality, this excitement, this happiness almost. And despite it being very woody, maybe there's cypriol in it, there's a kind of greener woody feel about it, and it's it's an alpine forest. That dog is filthy, I'm in loads of trouble, but it just smells magnificent and welcoming. And I think the raspberry is kind of what makes this stand out from other fragrances, because it's quite a unique touch with the woods, and it's not an overly sweet or tart or whatever raspberry. It's just that red joy again that raspberry brings, and that's what it's supposed to represent. This whole fragrance is the kind of warmth and welcoming of the Swedish peoples. I think a lot of time was spent on this, trying to get a fragrance that kind of represents all that. I've never been to Sweden, but I love ABBA. I go to IKEA, so I imagine in my mind that they are very lovely, welcoming folks. They of course have maniacs like Zlatan, like everywhere does, but yeah, that's Scentedsnowdrops Sweden. Next is from Killian. Now this is a slightly different cardamom one. This is obviously based around a cardamom coffee, so in there is kind of coffee, vanilla. What is the main things in this? I think there might be a little dash of nutmeg, which I tend to smell more than the cardamom. I'm not going to lie, but in the opening, it's very kind of punch you in the face spiciness, a kind of sharper, big, massive cardamom with the kind of power and heat of the nutmeg. And that, for me, the cardamom does kind of fade in with that kind of milky coffee feel. It's not overly coffee, so don't get overly excited if you're after a coffee scent. I'd say it's more a milky mocha by the end of it, and the cardamom just provides that little bit of sweetness in there. But for me, the main spice is the nutmeg. It's probably because I'm not a massive nutmeg fan that I spot that the most, but it all works nicely in there. Most people say it's mainly the cardamom, so probably is. So it's just a beautiful cardamom coffee, and it adds that kind of spice and sparkle to what the drink is. That's all I need to say. So that's Intoxicated from Killian. Finally, the designer, you're all going, it's going to be the new De La Homme, isn't it? It's going to be. No, but it's one that I think might have been slightly before it, but follows that kind of pattern, and that's Boss Soul. The first fragrance I ever bought. It's, you know, it's of its time. It's got the, you know, the citruses, there's orange, there's a massive cacophony of notes in there. It's this kind of spicy ambery one. But the cardamom is very prominent in it, and it does give it that same kind of feel as La Nuit de l'Homme, except this one is maybe, I think the cardamom gives it more, you know, like I was saying about that kind of thick wateriness about, I think it gives it more of that, and the citruses perhaps, oh god, sparkle a bit more, and it's a fragrance, with it being one of the first I bought, I suppose it's one that's very much kind of pushed my tastes into liking more floral kind of fragrances with that kind of warm, sparkly spice. And more, it would have been described at the time as metrosexual, because, you know, the concept of smelling smells to a specific gender is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. But you know, marketing does what it does, and this one would have lent more on that edge of being described as metrosexual. You know, sweeter, warmer, flowery, ambery, and it was magnificent. It's long gone now, but that's Boss Soul from Hugo Boss, Boss Soul, Hoss Boss, whatever the heck they called them with their weird names. So that's cardamom, and this was a tricky one to do, because I could probably do, you know, instead of a trio, 100 of these. Cardamom is very, very well used. Try to pick ones that I don't overly speak about all the time. The dog is in more mud, but this does to me stand out as probably the first cardamom fragrance I ever, the Hugo Boss stood out as the first I ever smelled, and maybe again help warm me towards them cardamom-y fragrances. And I think we all will own fragrances with cardamom on in, whether it does the same job or not. Anyway, there's no need to waffle on. Cardamom is cardamom, and we're all familiar with it, I would think, especially if you're a comfy lover. It goes beautifully in there, doesn't it? But what's your favourite cardamom scent? Do you prefer it to be a little more spicy, a little more watery, a little more kind of that fizzy sweetness it can sometimes give there? Alright folks, thanks, bye.